For all the people wondering why I've been having a nervous breakdown for the last 2 years, do you get it now? Because I've been following the MENA Uncensored team since almost the beginning, and I knew they were never going to stop. When the UN ordered that first ceasefire and everyone was celebrating, and I didn't say anything because I knew they were never going to stop. Can everyone please follow the whole MENA Uncensored team who's reported correctly on this G-side since the very beginning, because it's never been a war. It's always been a land grab, and it's always been an ETHNIC cleansing. So I'm going to read the updates from Shameen Sullivan tonight. I'm going to read these as quickly as possible because every time I upload Shameen updates, it literally takes nearly a day to upload. It's ridiculous. So I'm going to try and keep this video under 5 minutes. Update number 5, 26th of January 2026. Sources, journalists on the ground. Despite the recovery of the last Israeli body, the Israeli occupation intensified its assault on Gaza rather than de-escalating. Artillery shelling and heavy gunfire continued throughout the day and into the night across eastern Gaza, particularly in Al-Tufa around Al-Batsh cemetery and areas east of Gaza City. Israeli occupation forces carried out renewed demolitions of remaining residential buildings, including in Rafah, while helicopters, quadcopters and armoured vehicles fired repeatedly inside and outside their declared zones of deployment. It's just non-stop. New martyrs and injuries were recorded as fire continued outside Israeli occupation deployment areas. Emergency and ambulance sources confirmed the unaliving of Palestinian Mohammed Abed after he was shot in Jabalia, as well as injuries caused by drone-dropped munitions in Al-Tufa. Medical facilities continue to receive casualties amid ongoing shelling with no pause following political announcements or declarations of Phase 2. Health officials warn that Gaza's medical system is collapsing under sustained assault and deprivation. Gaza's Ministry of Health confirmed a 52% shortage in medicines, 71% shortage in medical supplies and laboratory materials, and over 70% shortage in cancer medications, directly impacting chemotherapy schedules, intensive care, anaesthesia and emergency surgeries. Officials reiterated that more than 8,000 Palestinians remain missing, either buried under the rubble or forcibly displaced by the Israeli occupation. In addition to entire families exterminated, with no surviving relatives left to report they're missing. It's come out today. The Israelis have wiped 2,700 Palestinian families completely off the map. There's not a single member of them families left. 6,000 families, there's only one member of those families left, and 40,000 families have been targeted because it's never been a war. Central Palestine and the West Bank. The Israeli occupation escalated raids and military pressure across the northern West Bank. Israel occupation forces tightened checkpoints around Nablus, stormed eastern neighbourhoods from the Alon Murray checkpoint and carried out incursions into multiple villages west of Jenin, including Ramana, Tabi and Zabira. Mass arrests and seizures accompanied the raids. At least 60 Palestinians were seized during large-scale Israeli occupation operations in Al-Ar and Sidus, north of Tulkarem, as home invasions, interrogations and movement restrictions intensified in parallel with the bombardment of Gaza. Israeli settler violence continued alongside military operations. Israeli settlers escalated attacks east of Nablus, targeting Palestinian land, homes and livelihoods under armed protection, reinforced its settlement expansion and forced displacement as an inseparable extension of the Israeli occupation's military campaign. A Palestinian hostage was released from Israeli occupation detention after 2 years. Mamoun al-Qaeda from the town of, I'm not even going to attempt to say that, near northwest of Ramallah, was released after 2 years held in Israeli occupation detention facilities. His release comes amid ongoing mass arrests across the West Bank, underscoring the asymmetry between isolated releases and the broader system of arbitrary detention enforced by the Israeli occupation. Regional, the Israeli occupation expanded its aggression beyond Gaza and the West Bank. In southern Lebanon, Israeli occupation aircraft bombed a house in Yaron, while artillery targeted the outskirts of Eitarun, confirming that escalation on the northern front continues. Because they've broke the ceasefire in Lebanon over 6,000 times now. Can everyone follow Leila Hatoum, please? Political, Netanyahu openly declared that the next phase is disarmament, not reconstruction. Following the recovery of the last Israeli body, Netanyahu stated explicitly that Phase 2 would focus on disarming Hamas and turn Gaza into a demilitarised zone, stressing that this phase is not a reconstruction phase. The statement removed any remaining ambiguity. Reconstruction is being used as leverage, not a right. Israeli and US officials coordinated a narrative framing coercion as diplomacy. The White House described the recovery of the Israeli body as a major diplomatic achievement. I love the way a body matters more to the international community than the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that are under the rubble and the people that are still being unalived right now. The racism makes me physically sick. US officials confirmed that 25 countries have joined the so-called Gaza Peace Council. This world's so disgusting. Openly acknowledging coordination with Turkey, Qatar, Egypt and Hamas, even as reconstruction aid and crossings are conditioned on forced political and military concessions. Plans for governance were tied to pressure, not Palestinian sovereignty. Israeli media reports that members of a US-backed technocratic government are expected to enter Gaza after the opening of Rafah under American pressure as part of a post-war administrative framework shaped externally and imposed amid continued Israeli occupation fire. Information control remains intact. Haaretz reported that Israel informed its Supreme Court it will continue banning foreign journalists from entering Gaza even after Rafah opens, reinforcing the deliberate restriction on independent documentation of conditions on the ground. Palestinian position. Palestinian factions rejected attempts to rewrite the agreement after compliance. Hamas leader Hussein Badran confirmed that all obligations under the ceasefire were fulfilled, stating that the recovery of the last Israeli body eliminates Netanyahu's remaining pretext. He demanded full withdrawal in unrestricted aid entry and the opening of Rafah in both directions, warning against political manipulation of humanitarian obligations. Closing, the language has finally caught up with the reality. Netanyahu's own words, echoed by Israeli and American officials, make explicit what Palestinians in Gaza have lived for months. This was never a pathway to relief, construction or recovery. Phase 2 is not about rebuilding lives or lifting siege. It is about enforcing disarmament under fire, conditioning survival on submission and reshaping Gaza through coercion rather than consent. With every declared pretext now exhausted, the continued bombardment exposes the truth. Bodies were never the obstacle. Compliance was never the issue. Even after the last demand was met, the Israeli occupation continued shelling neighbourhoods, demolishing homes and tightening control. What is unfolding is not a peace process. Delayed, it is a strategy revealed, because it's always been a land grab. Please follow the whole Mina Uncensored team. Layla Hatim, Shameen Solomon, who does updates from Gaza every day, multiple times. Sarah Wilkinson, Nina in Department of War Crimes. Please follow Real Journalists, Free Palestine.